Aloha, it has been a while since I've done one of these kind of deconstruction videos with one of my images. So I wanted to take a little bit further step back this time and start way at the beginning of setting up the scene and dialing in the composition before we even edit. So I'm in Bridge. This is what I use to sort and cull my photos. And this is the first attempt at lining up this composition. This is a composition we had scouted before and the client agreed to. However, once we got there, he decided he wanted to play around with some other angles. So these are some test shots after we've kind of cleared off the counter. It's also worth noting that there was a big painting here of a wave that you'll see later. There was another painting here that we took down, and then there was some clutter on the countertops. You can also see this big cutting board here that we later removed. So let's click through a couple of these pictures as we talk through this. We decided that it might be better to leave the door a little bit open to show into the hallway a bit. Still playing around with some things, playing around with some different exposures. We played around with moving the camera. You can see all the clutter. This is the dining room table here. We had moved some things off the counters over here. So we were just kind of playing around with the angle here. We decided that this just had a big giant coral block column right in the middle of the frame, which we didn't like. We tried at an angle, and that was a little too similar. We had an angle or a composition that we shot previous that was kind of in this general area over here, so we didn't want to use this. We tried a little bit off-centered, showing a little bit more of the wine cooler over here, and in the end we went right back to what we had already decided on during the scouting session, which was back over here. You can also see we took the painting that was back here, this big wave, and kind of leaned it up against the column here to see if that would work out. There's my client working on stringing something up. So we took the painting from the wall back here, and he used some zip ties to make kind of a makeshift hanger to hang it up over here, which we'll get to in just a second. So there it is, hung up. We tried many different things on top of the counter to kind of balance out the image. We tried different things in the background here. You can see this mirror. There's a reflection of my flash. This is kind of testing out where to put some flashes for this shot. Keep in mind the light source here directly behind me is a massive open wall that goes out to the ocean, and also to the right of the frame there's another big giant wall that's basically just completely open air and looks out at the ocean as well. So at this point we're still kind of testing things out. You can see in the background here we're testing out what's going to look best. We decided these utensils look pretty good. Again, we opened the door, and then we also played around with some staging back here. So this is a mirror, and what you're looking at in the mirror, these two kind of black columns are kind of a big wall shelf unit. We put this vase up here and decided to give it a little bit of height. I think we just put some coasters underneath it to give it a little bit more height there in the mirror. So the reason I'm explaining all this is just to show you how much effort and decisions making goes into crafting each one of these images. We really do spend a lot of time putting thought into every little bit of detail. The last thing that we talked about was down here, the wine cooler, the wine fridge. Here is not blocked, and then here I've held up a black cloth to block the light reflection from there. And eventually we decided that we were going to block off that light, and then at some point I actually moved around the bottles in here to be a little bit neater and nicer as well. So there's my client checking out the painting in the back. Now, this hand means this is where I'm going to start. So all the stuff before this is testing. Once I put my hand in front of the camera and take a shot like this, that's letting me know that as I'm sorting through these when I go to edit, that everything after the hand is what I'll be using. So we can go through. Here's a ambient exposure. This is very light, and then I bracketed. You can see I've given a 1 star and a red label to the images that I'll eventually use, and I'll go unpack that in Photoshop here in just a few minutes. So here's a middle ambient exposure. Here's one a little bit darker that I also chose. And you can see the ones that didn't get selected. Here's a bit darker one again. And then you can see we've kind of changed how the oven looks. And so I used a black cloth again behind the camera to block out some reflections from that oven back there. And I had to do it in a couple different places because here you've got this reflection here. and here you've got a reflection up at the top. So again, I was planning and kind of editing in my head of what I was going to be using in the final image as I was constructing it in Photoshop. Now this is where flashes start to come into play. This is all ambient, I still believe. This one is not flagged off over on the wine cooler. Some of the earlier shots were flagged off, like this one, for example. Here I've removed the flag from over here, and I'm going to start playing around with the flashes. And you can see the flash shadows created on the floor down here, which we're not going to want, but there's still some areas where we might want some of the flash, maybe the ceiling up at the top or something like that. In the back room here, I've got a flash. This is the main flash shot that I ended up selecting. Now I was playing around with putting up a white curtain to eliminate some of the reflections. We knew that we were going to eliminate this electric panel back here, which also meant that I was going to have to eliminate the reflection on the counter. So I was playing around with the white cloth. It seemed to work well. So then I got my client to help me hold up my white cloth, which is black on the opposite side. And we just moved our way down the counter to eliminate all these reflections. You can see the painting here, you can see the light switch here, the electric panel here, and of course the oven here. So as we go down, we just moved our way down the counter with that cloth, and there we go. So we're going to hop over to Photoshop and see how we created this image. So here's the final image. Looks nice and neat. But let's turn that layer off and start at the very beginning. Here we go. So first things first is you can see that all of these exposures here are actually smart objects. This little icon down in the layer means it's a smart object. So what I do is I open up all my images in Photoshop, and then recently, this is pretty new for me since the last time I made a video probably, is I'm now using Raya Pro 5.0 for layer masking. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't used much of the layer mask, but they have this button called Stack, which works really great and really fast when you open up smart objects. So what does that mean? That means each one of these layers that I just pulled in, I can double click them. And if I wanted to adjust anything in the camera raw panel, I could do that. And then I could hop back over here into Photoshop and the changes would be made. So I now stack everything with the Raya Pro using smart objects, which I really like. So here's my base exposure. It's an ambient shot with no flashes. We're going to build up on top of this. So next thing we do is here's a lighter ambient exposure, and I just lightened up this back room over here. So you can see the layer mask here. Let's see, just right there. That's all we've used from that shot. Then the flash, I didn't use much flash at all in here. You can see it's only at 34%. And where is the flash being used? Pretty much I used the entire flash shot and erased these shadows down here and erased some of the flash glare up here. So what does that look like? We'll show you the whole flash shot right there. So here's the whole flash shot. Again, you can see I'm going to take away these shadows and take away this kind of glare. And then we're going to knock that down. It was at 34%. So just a light flash layer. You can see kind of how much is used, that 34% on top of the ambient. Then we have to tackle the oven. So let's zoom in a little bit. First oven shot looks like this. So, you know, some of this looks pretty good, but then we have this big reflection up here. So the next oven shot looks better up here, and we blend those two together, and here's what our oven looks like. So before and after, before and after. Now we're going to go to the countertop. So I called this counter flags. You can see here the opacity is set at 75%. We'll change it back in a little bit, but let's show what this counter flag layer looks like, or group. So the first one, here's myself, my client, holding up that flag. The second one, just painted this area here from this image. So essentially what I've done with this group is I have made a selection of just the counter area and made a layer mask there so that everything underneath it is what's showing. So essentially we just worked our way down. So there's the flag showing up there from this image. Oops. Here we go. From this image, painted in just this little part here. And again, we keep kind of working our way down the counter. So eventually we get to the point where we have the counter completely kind of whited out. You don't have any of the reflections from anything in the back, which is okay, but it doesn't look super natural. So without it, I think the reflections are a little too distracting. They're pretty hot right here. And of course, I don't want this panel thing in the way. It's a little bit too distracting here. So turn that on, and we're going to bring that down to 75%. I like nice, even, rounded numbers like that. And then we go to my main fixes layer. So if I turn this on, you can see we're going to get rid of the reflections here. So even the reflection down here, I had to get rid of it because, again, the counter is only 75% opacity. So we still have some reflection of that electric box. So we got rid of that. What else did we get rid of? We've got a outlet back here and an outlet back here, and then a little bit of reflections of those outlets. So get rid of those. You can see we've got a hanger up over here. So minor things. I probably cleaned up a few dust and scratches on the floor or something like that as I zoomed in and kind of moved around. Now we did an oven overlay, as I call it. So in here, we literally just have black layers that are on top of the oven. So this first one, you can see it's just right here. I selected and filled it in black and put it at 85%. Why did I do that? Because I felt like this was super distracting, being able to see into the oven like that. The next one, only at 41%. If we select it, you can see just black right here, only at 41%. There's before and after, just darkening up a little bit to make it a little less distracting. There's before and there's after. Now, the light removal. I don't like having all these dots and recessed lighting on the ceiling. I wasn't 100% sure if my client was going to ask me to put those back in. So instead of doing that on the fixes layer, I did it on a separate layer, just in case he wanted them back in. Also in that layer, there's a ceiling fan blade over here. Speaking of ceiling fan, it's worth noting that we did arrange the ceiling fan so that it intersected in this spot. My client wanted to show the ceiling fan in this frame, and we rotated it so that it was actually positioned just like this because we felt like that was the best position for it. So again, here's the lights removed. Looks a lot cleaner, if I do say so myself. Now this painting, because of how we had to kind of rig it up, it was sitting a little bit low, not even in this big coral column here. And of course you have the other hanger stuff up there. So what I did was I selected everything I had up until this point, created a second copy of all that, and flattened it into one layer that looks like this. And then I just moved that layer up. So you can see essentially it's just shifted up, right? Well, now that it's shifted up, I can select that painting and move just the painting up. So here we have the painting that I just kind of shifted up and took out the little hanger up at the top. So we're getting to the home stretch here. Finally, you can see all this selection made here, kind of the white ceiling and walls and stuff. I just did a desaturation layer. So turn that on, you can see kind of the yellows come out of the ceiling and the back walls back here in the mirror. Again, before, got some of the yellows and reds, maybe a little cyan or blue over here. Turn that on and everything is desaturated a bit. How much is it desaturated? 68 on the master layer. And finally, we have a pop. So this is just a curves adjustment layer. I put it to linear contrast. That seemed to be about right. There's before the pop and after the pop. And that is our final image. I hope you learned a little bit about my process and you've taken away something that you can put into your process. Thanks for watching. See you next time.